So, FX Impact, FX Impact X. I've said it many times before, and I will unashamedly say it again. These are my favorite air guns in the world. Not saying that they're the best air guns in the world, because I think that is a very difficult thing to quantify with all the different shooting disciplines and everything like that. But for my purposes, these are my favorite air guns. And I do want to actually talk about them today, because I think there are quite a few misconceptions about what the FX Impact X is and the differences between these two guns. If you go online and you read about it, you'll probably get told that the only difference between these two is the barrels, that the Impact X just has a smooth twist X barrel and the old Impact had the smooth twist. And for the most part, this is the major difference. This is the thing that you're going to notice pretty much immediately. But there are some minor differences on the internals of these guns, how they perform, and there are many things that have changed over the years before the early models of the Impact and the current version of the Impact X. Rolling development, as we say. And I do want to talk about this, because if you're like me and those little things are, you know, something that makes a big difference, then you're going to want to know about this, because those little internal, you know, the differences in the mechanics, the small things like the regulator or the valve that have changed over the years are going to make a big difference to performance at long range, let's say 100 yards. So let's go through it, let's talk about the differences, and let's get the story straight. A few months ago, I filmed a video with the Wildcat and the Wildcat Mark II, and in that video I discussed the differences between the two models, but spoke mostly about the rolling development that had happened to the Wildcat over the past few years. Now, rolling development is not something that is discussed much, it's something that happens really behind the scenes, so the general public doesn't know that minor things are being tweaked all the time, but this does happen. And in that video, I spoke about the fact that the newer Wildcat Mark 1s were actually very similar to the Wildcat Mark II. You know, barrels aside, it wasn't a massive step forward. And the exact same thing applies to the Impact. You don't know it, but over the years, this gun has been tweaked and tweaked and tweaked at the factory, making it a little bit better every single time. And if you've got a very recently made Impact Mark 1, I suppose you can call it that, before the Impact X came out, and you put an X barrel on it, you've pretty much got the same gun. But if you've got an older version of the Impact, well, it's not quite the same gun. So it's something that's worth talking about. Let's take a look at my original Impact. And the first thing you must know is that this is the same gun I've had for many years. Every single video you've seen with my Impact has been this exact gun. I've not been switching guns all the time behind the scenes and trying to trick you guys. This is the same gun. I have made some minor changes along the way. Originally, I had the telescopic shroud on the smooth twist barrel. That was like just over 2 years ago. I then very quickly actually put the fixed shroud on it. I just preferred the fixed shroud. And then about a year ago, I got a prototype smooth twist X barrel in 22 caliber to test out, and since then it's just been smooth twist X barrels. So essentially I've kind of had a form of the Impact X for more than a year, and that's why I haven't really felt the reason to switch to the Impact X, because this gun has really been absolutely solid for me. I've had to do things like maintain the gun in terms of, you know, oiling the moving parts, changing 1 or 2 O-rings, but that's all standard procedure for any PCP air gun. Every single one of my PCP air guns, regardless of brand, need that kind of maintenance. So I've had nothing breaking. This gun's been working like a dream for me, and I've just been really happy with it. It actually took a very long time for me to realize that the Impact X was different to my gun, barrels aside. I had to look very closely to see the differences, but there are differences there, and some of them are easy to see. For example, on the older Impact, there aren't any lines here on the side of the gun, on the side of the breech block, and you do see some kind of funny looking edges from the machining process, whereas on the Impact X you've got these nice lines added on here, and you don't see those funny machining lines over here inside the trigger grip. So those are, you know, minor cosmetic changes. The anodizing is also different. The anodizing on my old Impact, I didn't have any issues with it, but the anodizing on the new Impact X is definitely better. I spoke to FX, apparently they changed their anodizing method. The new anodizing, I think it looks better. It's a smoother kind of look, it's a darker look, and it's more consistent. So if you have different batches of different parts, they're all coming out exactly the same color, whereas on the old Impact you might find some slight variations. So I do think the new anodizing is better. FX also listened to public opinion about the telescopic shroud versus the fixed shroud. Many people like the telescopic shroud, but I think the majority of us wanted to see the fixed shroud as standard. You know, the gun was already compact enough in itself without needing the shroud to be telescopic. So FX have done that. The Impact X now comes standard with a fixed shroud. I think you can still buy the telescopic shroud version of this gun, but I do think it's an improvement to have the telescopic shroud as standard. FX also listened to people about the fill probe being really difficult to access there. In my old Impact, you won't see it from that far out, but I'll put a cutaway here. There's not much space around the fill probe, and so you really struggle to get that faster fill adapter out here. So on the Impact X and a lot of the newer, older Impact models, if that makes sense, that area's been machined out a little bit just to allow your fingers to get in there so you can access that full probe, and this is a big deal. I really struggled sometimes on my older Impact to get that probe out. The new one is much easier. Another kind of functional change is the fact that the valve housing has actually been made a little bit bigger. It's got a little bit more volume in it. I'm not sure the function of that. It could be to get more power, it could be something to do with efficiency, but the valve housing is better, and from what I understand, it's an improvement on the old setup. Now, all those changes are great, but they are very minor. The biggest thing by far is that the Impact X has a superior regulator, and there's no doubt in my mind that this regulator is better. If you've gone on forums before, you've probably read somewhere along the line about some of the older Impacts that had issues with the regulator, either leaking or what they call climbing, when the regulator pressure seems to slowly climb if you don't shoot the gun for a long time. And I haven't had any issues with my particular gun, but from what I understand, FX, when they designed the original Impact, they designed it around springs of a certain strength and a certain size, which then later became difficult to find. I don't know if it was something to do with the supplier not being able to supply it, or if the quality of their springs went down from their suppliers or something, but the original batches of Impact that were made were perfectly functioning. They worked perfectly fine. No issues with that. If you have one of the very old Impacts, you may not be able to put one of the newer regulators in it because the housing is actually machined a different shape. But anyway, they sorted out the leak issue. Those old forum posts are not something you need to worry about if you buy the new Impacts, because for the past year or two there have been hardly any faulty Impacts from what I understand. The Impact X was designed, the regulator was designed pretty much from scratch. The piston is much stronger in the Impact X. The housing has a larger diameter to fit bigger, stronger regulator springs. And what this means is two things. Because the springs are stronger, it means that the regulator is absolutely solid. It holds its position perfectly. The rig does not climb at all. I've done everything I can to mess this rig up. I've been quite kind of pushing the limits of it, and I've been able to do that because I know at least if I mess this gun up, I've got this one to fall back on. But I've really pushed this thing to the limits. I've put the rig up to 180 bar, and it's held very nicely actually, without climbing or leaking or anything. This gun actually holds pressure better than my day states and that should say something, because the day states are not as complicated and there's less that can go wrong in them. But this has actually been great because it's kind of freed me up to do things that I wouldn't normally be able to do. I made a video probably a year or two ago discussing the Impact and how to get the best out of it, and in that video I mentioned that you should not exceed a reg pressure of around 150 bar. And I said that keeping the old regulators in mind, knowing that the reg springs inside were not very strong, and also said you shouldn't adjust the regulator against the pressure. In other words, if you turn that regulator screw in other words, you want to reduce the reg pressure, you're pushing against the cylinder pressure, and that can strip the threads on that screw. You can damage it quite badly. But because of the new design being much more rigid, you can actually adjust the pressure up or down without having to take your cylinder out, which is great. It's not really something that I think about or worry about, but it's nice to have the peace of mind that your equipment's a little bit stronger and it's less likely to break if you do make the mistake of doing that. Previously, there wasn't a need to go above 150 bar because with everyone shooting pellets, even with 30 caliber, 25 caliber, shooting heavy pellets, a reg pressure of 150 bar is plenty. You can get really good velocity, good energy with those pellets, you don't need to turn the rig up. It's more than enough. In fact, I think the impacts that won Extreme Bench Rest this year were only sitting on 140 bar rig pressure with those 700mm barrels. So there's no need to go higher than that. But with the introduction of the slug liners, and especially with me having worked on these slug liners for quite a while and putting a lot of my time and energy into trying to see what they can do, I've needed to put the rig pressure a little bit higher and kind of push the limits of the gun to experiment with heavier slugs and, you know, trying to get the best out of them. And I did want to work with heavier slugs, even though I could have worked with lighter slugs, because the heavier the slugs are, the better the sectional density and the better the BC. So I've actually wanted to shoot heavier slugs on purpose in order to improve the BC. And at the moment, I have this gun shooting at 53 foot-pounds with 26 grain Nielsen slugs at 950 feet per second. That's a beast. That's a beast of an air gun, and this thing is an absolute monster. Now, I do want to put a little disclaimer here. You will not be able to get these settings out of your gun without modifying the hammer spring and the hammer, and I'm not going to tell you how to do that just yet, because I want to actually take this gun apart and find out exactly what I did to do this. I don't want to give you any false information that can lead you to damage your own gun. So for the time being, don't touch your gun in terms of the hammer and the valve. Don't put your rig pressure above 150 bar unless you absolutely have to. But at some point in the future, I'll share information of how I did this so you can kind of replicate what I've done. But this gun, I can take it out to 200 meters and I can hit a 20 centimeter or 8-inch gong 10 times out of 10, even in with a crosswind blowing with those slugs, which is fantastic. And 100 yards, peppering a 3 or 4 inch gong over and over again, even in 10 mile per hour winds. So this is my kind of extreme long range hunting rig, but you really don't need the setup if you want to shoot slugs. The old impacts will do just fine. This impact I've got at 150 bar, the rig's holding up perfectly fine. It is solid. I've adjusted it so that I'm shooting the 23 grain Nielsen slugs at 950 feet per second, which gives me, I think it's like 44 or 45 foot-pounds, which is more than enough in my opinion, even out to 120, 130 yards, no problem. And this is actually still my go-to gun. This is just for like special occasions where I really need to reach out, but the superior kind of balance between power and harmonics and accuracy lies with this gun that has not been modified much. This is still my go-to gun. So that's just a little bit of extra information of why I wanted the Impact X. It's not to do with the barrel, because I could have easily put a Smooth Twist X barrel on the old Impact, but it's more to do with the regulator, and the regulator being a little bit stronger, and I can, you know, be able to get more power out of this gun. So that was my thought process behind it. Do I have a favorite? Well, not really. I think that with the Smooth Twist X barrel on both of these guns, they pretty much perform the same. Technically, the Smooth Twist X, the Impact X is a better gun. The features in this gun, there's no doubt in my mind that it's been refined a little bit more over the old Impact. But I think for sentimental reasons, if only could keep one gun, this would be the gun I'd keep. It has been absolutely flawless for me, and I'm definitely not going to be selling it anytime soon. I'm holding on to this one for the rest of my life. So yeah, the old Impact's still my favorite, but the Impact X is a better gun, and if you're looking to get one, this should be the one. It is fantastic. And that's it for this week, guys. I just wanted to kind of clarify that. I know there's been some confusion of, you know, what the Impact X really is. Hopefully I've kind of cleared it up a little bit and giving you some inside information on you know, the inner workings at FX and how they're constantly trying to make things better. But yeah, I'll see you next week, and hopefully we'll get some more hunting videos of these babies out soon, because I've been itching to get my trigger finger on these guns out in the field and actually do some hunting. I do actually have some cool plans to meet up with some other guys in South Africa and do some pest control with them, some guys who have some really cool looking permissions. Also have the Extreme Bench Rest coming up soon in Arizona, so I won't be taking these guns with me. I'll be borrowing an Impact from them, but it should be interesting, and I'm really keen to get out there and meet those guys. So if you haven't signed up for Extreme Bench Rest yet, get out there and do it. I'd love to see you there. Thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you next time.